If you've played D&D, or really any tabletop RPG for long enough, eventually your players will end up in the same place. Everyone's favourite location, the sewers.
Yeah, James.
I'm surrounded by poopy.
You can feel it happen in real time, the energy draining out of the room. Sewers seem to have this effect at the mere mention of them. And it's not just at the table, it's the same for video games too. The sewer level, the universal groan. For some reason, or reasons, we will dig into in this video, sewers have become one of the most reliably dreaded tropes in tabletop RPGs. And to a degree, they have earned that reputation fair and square. But after years of running games and studying what makes adventures pop, I have come to the conclusion sewers are actually awesome. The problem is actually specific fixable design mistakes we all make without actually thinking about it, because that's what sewers are like. And when you strip back all that slime and bad smell jokes, do you know what you have, viewers? An urban equivalent of a dungeon. A hidden world beneath the city, full of weird creatures, forgotten history, secrets, and people who really, and I mean really, don't want to be found. But before we fix the sewers, let's plug in our diagnostic equipment, fire this bad boy up, and look at why the location fails so consistently. I've summed it up to 4 problems that almost always show up together. The first is aesthetic monotony. When I think about other classic dungeon environments like a dragon's lair with its shiny loot, scorched walls, and the smell of sulfur, or an ancient tomb that has crumbling sarcophagi, and strange murals, and traps that were clearly designed by someone with a grudge, you know who you are. Then when I think about sewers, it's brick, with a side of more brick, and some wet brick for dessert, some stanky brown water down the middle followed by another brick corridor, then an intersection, and repeat that 46 times. It's not just boring to narrate and walk through, it kills exploration. Every turn looks the same, every intersection looks like the one you passed. It feels like an A to B location rather than something to be explored, you know? The second thing is mechanical friction. I feel like we can lean into the realism of sewers by piling on environmental penalties all at once. And I mean, sewer plague is in the rulebook. But when you're already fighting in a narrow tunnel at disadvantage and movement is restricted, and now everyone's rolling con saves just to function, it doesn't make combat feel any more dangerous, it just becomes exhausting. Like I say, when you pair this with the narrow tunnels, and now we have created the conga line of death, one person at a time, and the dude at the front is the only one able to poke stuff with his sword. Everyone else is tapping their feet in poo waiting. At 3 we have ecological predictability. Ask any experienced player what resides in a sewer. They can tell you without blinking. You've got giant rats, your slimes, some oozes of various pigments, and maybe an otayug if the DM is feeling risky, maybe even a were-rat. Once the players know what's on the menu, there's no surprises. It stops being mysterious and becomes even more so a series of rooms with expected obstacles. And it plays like a procedurally generated dungeon in a video game, efficient, boring, and forgettable. Fourth thing is sneaky. Players come to the table with an idea in their brains of being heroes or murder hobos. They want to fight dragons, unravel conspiracies, and make dramatic speeches to kings. None of that entailed wading through sewage. There's a tonal whiplash between the epic story you are imagining and the very unepic reality of standing knee-deep in medieval waste. You grab these 4, slap them in a blender, give it a slurp, and you have what I call sewer sickness. But don't worry kids, I have the antidote. Like I said earlier, putting your players in a sewer isn't the problem. It's how you are thinking about the sewer. It's understandable to think about their infrastructure, pipes, waste disposal, drainage channels. I mean, hey, the city's poop's gotta go somewhere, am I right? And the group needs to move without being seen from A to B, and that sewer is looking pretty convenient. In and out, done. But hold on, let's think about what a city's underground actually is in a fantasy world. Every city has things they want to hide, or bury. Smugglers need routes that bypass custom checkpoints. There's criminals who need to move between safe houses without crossing those pesky guard patrols. What about outcasts and communities that exist on the margins of society, and have built lives in the spaces the surface would tend to ignore? Sewers ain't just plumbing, there's a whole shadow city beneath the real one, and doesn't thinking about them that way immediately give you 10 ideas in an instant? Tunnels? No thanks, I have districts in my sewers. Yes, there are monsters, but there's also factions, and those random encounter tables? Forget them. There are stories waiting to unfold underground. Forget A to B, my sewers are locations. A place where things happen, relationships exist, and history is buried in the walls. So let's get fixing. The first one is structural, literally. Realistic sanitation networks aren't adventure spaces. When you think about real sewers, they're cramped, uniform, and designed for efficiency. We're not designing real sewers, viewers. We're trying to create places where interesting things happen. So let's steal the aesthetic of a sewer while building something that's actually functioning like a dungeon. And no one's saying you have to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of great examples throughout the world and its history. Let's take Naples for example. Beneath their modern city streets, there are Greek-era cisterns that were repurposed by the Romans as aqueducts and then repurposed as medieval storage. And then guess what? They were repurposed again as World War II bomb shelters. Multiple civilizations stacked directly on top of one another, each one of them leaving their infrastructure and mark behind for the next one to inherit. We basically have mega dungeons that built themselves over thousands of years. And we've got to take a look at London's Victorian sewers. They're literally cathedral-scale brick tunnels that had the city's old lost rivers running through them. Medieval waterways the city eventually just swallowed whole. Edinburgh's South Bridge vaults were built, used and then sealed off and forgotten for nearly 200 years before anyone rediscovered them. And how can we not mention the Derinkuyu city that was found in Turkey underground back in 1963? This huge underground city is carved 18 stories deep with ventilation shafts and wine cellars and churches and rolling stone doors that seal entire levels from the inside. It's crazy. It is functioning already like a dungeon. I guess someone just forgot to put the monsters in. Or did they? The pattern that you see across all of these is literally the same. The deeper you go, the older it gets. Each new level getting older and stranger. And that's what we should use as our design principle. Fantasy worlds work exactly the same way. They didn't appear from nothing. It was built on top of an older city, which was built on top of something older still. The newer sewer tunnels cut through those buried layers constantly, which means sewer can have a room that was once a noble's wine cellar, a collapsed vault that was a temple to a forgotten deity, or a stretch of elegant stonework from 3 centuries ago that looks jarringly out of place amid the brick drainage channels surrounding it. This idea on its own solves the grey tunnel problem instantly. Every section of the sewer feels different because pieces of the city's history are literally buried at different depths. Now let's add some vertical design. Get your encounters off the ground. Raised walkways or high vaulted ceilings, gantries and ladders between levels. You can even add water channels that are at different elevations and you can manipulate them with valves and sluice gates. This immediately kills the conga line problem. You now have platforms above and water below and walkways on both sides, which means your fighter, your rogue and the druid all have distinct positions and tactical options. Combat is much more interesting in 3 dimensions. Next, let's look at that district-based design I was talking about. The sewer isn't uniform, it mirrors the city above it, right? So with that in mind, below the wealthy's quarter, it would have elegant, regularly maintained cisterns, cleanish water and carefully carved stonework, almost suspiciously well kept. Wink wink. And then if we go below the industrial district, there's chemical runoffs from tanneries and alchemists staining the water with strange colours. And there's even fungus that has evolved to eat the runoff and occasionally is a fire hazard. And then if we shift our view below the docks, it has tunnels that open into tidal caves. The salt water mixes with the sewer water and smugglers use the cave as staging areas. And the sea even brings in things that don't normally live inland. So just reflecting the sewer with the city above it creates this hidden history. Players start making connections like, wait, if the rich quarters tunnels are maintained like this, someone is paying for that maintenance. Why? It's some good stuff. Our second fix is about population. Most adventures in sewers have monsters, and very few have characters. Creatures get sprinkled into the rooms like obstacles, a cobalt here, an ooze there, generic threat in the last room. They don't interact with each other, and they don't have goals. They're not part of a community. They're just things that damage the party until they stop moving. So instead of that, you should build stuff like were-rat clans. Were-rats are almost always used as generic enemies, which is an absolute waste. Were-rats know these tunnels better than anyone. They're information brokers, and they can move things for the right price. They have alliances with surface criminals and grudges against city officials who occasionally try to exterminate them. Yes, your party might come in swinging, but if your party's smart, they'll quickly realise that the were-rat who knows every route in the section of the sewer is worth more alive than they are dead. They could literally become reluctant guides. Maybe your party accidentally walks into a were-rat political dispute that has nothing to do with the main quest and everything to do with whether one faction or another controls the tunnel junction near the old grain district. And I love cobalt maintenance crews. The city sewers have to be maintained somehow, right? And it's by a colony of kobolds who live in the service passages. City officials know they're there, and they tolerate it because the kobolds keep the cisterns from flooding, and they do it for pretty much nothing. And the kobolds, for their part, have built a surprisingly comfortable life down there, and have zero interest in causing trouble. And this creates an unusual dynamic. The monsters are essentially city employees, and attacking them would be both morally questionable and practically stupid. Are you gonna stop the spring from flooding then? It's a similar case with the Thieves Guilds. They don't just use the sewers occasionally, they've built down there hidden doors in the sewer walls that open into basement storage rooms throughout the city. They have marked routes that only guild members know to read, as well as staging areas and dead drops, and occasionally a body disposal problem that got out of hand. And if your players don't understand any of this, they'll keep bumping into things that don't make sense until they realize the entire network beneath the merchant district is effectively a guild property. And you've got to throw in them strange encounters, you know, the ones that will only occur here. Maybe a river troll that has made its home in a deep channel. Normally you'd hack it down, but guess what? It's partially submerged, and sewer water regenerates it twice as fast as normal. The party can't kill it in a straight fight. They need to find the sluice gate controls, drain the channel, and fight it in the mud while managing the clock before the tunnel floods again. So you can create this thing with strange monsters, you can use the environment to create this puzzle, and a countdown because your party only has so much HP. And if they keep going like this, they're all going to get wiped out. Or you could use a fatberg. You don't know what a fatberg is? Look it up, it's genuinely disturbing. It's a pulsing mass of solidified grease, refuge, and things best not identified that has grown big enough to start moving. It doesn't move fast though, don't get me wrong, but it reacts to fire and light, and the party needs to get past it, and fire is usually the first solution players reached for in a sewer, right? Another idea is an ooze that has formed a symbiotic relationship with a cluster of zombies, and the nasty ooze has partially digested them just enough to animate them, and use them as lures to pull prey into its mass. The players are going to automatically think these zombies are trying to eat them, but it's not. It's actually the bait. And on that note, not every encounter underground should be a fight. Some of the best sewer adventures mix tension with moments of strangeness that remind players this is a place with its own weird culture. You could have graffiti on the walls in installments that tells a story, and section by section, you can read the account of a gnome named Chelsea. If you know, you know. Leave it in the comments. And about 50 years ago, they attempted to unionize the city rats, and his last inscription just reads, "It didn't go well." You could even take a bit of inspiration from movies or TV shows and use a child in a yellow raincoat searching for a toy boat that fell through the grate and add your own mix to it. She's completely calm about being alone in the sewer. She seems to know exactly where she's going. She will even happily give the party directions if they ask. Or you could use a group of turtle monks that are navigating through the tunnels by an ancient map, looking for a gift for their father. And they are polite and slightly lost, and they carry something wrapped in a cloth that produces a faint humming sound when the water rises. They're not likely to explain what it is, but if you help them navigate, it will earn the party a favor and a shortcut that should not exist given the layout of these tunnels. I've also used things like hidden gambling dens where criminals bet on adventurers surviving dangerous tunnel sections, and maybe even halfway through an encounter the party starts to realize they're the current event. I could probably go on for about another half an hour, but you get the idea. The last piece of this puzzle is the environment and letting it do the narrative work. You can use things like charred skeletons fused to a tunnel wall to tell the party something exploded here, dramatically, and if they start poking around the exploded skeleton on the wall, they find traces of methane. Flammable gas pockets form naturally in sewer environments, so if they light up their torch, they're going to go boom. You can even use things like the water flow to tell a story, and it can even be a tactical one. Spend a bit of time learning about sluice gates and valves, and you'll find that flooding a tunnel changes everything. Just like the use of the other sluice gate with the river troll, it adds another layer to it. Can we escape before we drowned? It's the environmental details that really reward attention. You can use things like fresh air shafts that can be tracked to find exits and cracks in the ceiling where sunlight falls. I've used things like stains on the wall at regular intervals marking the high water line for the last 10 years, except in one section where the marks are 6 feet higher, which makes the party start questioning, why is this section flooding more than the others? And if you're struggling to come up with your own ideas, there's plenty in pre-made modules. Specifically to hand right now, I have the Taldore Reborn book. They actually have a couple of good ideas for starting sewer quests or plots, like the Primordial Children adventure, which works for any level. It's got a bit in there about the Grotto and Amon, about how the class, a faction, operate underground, in the sewers and in other subterranean structures. Or even Underwalk Ward, which is a new addition to a residential sprawl that's built from repurposed sections of the sewer system. It even gives you history about why it was built during the invasion of the Chroma Conclave in hopes of keeping the populace hidden. and the only people that reside there now are people that are too poor to return to the other wards, or it even states by humans or monsters that want to go unseen. So you don't have to come up with all the ideas yourself, you can just take inspiration from what other people have made. And there's loads of stuff out there. So basically what I'm trying to say is that sewer adventures shouldn't feel like a chore, or like you need to get through this to get to the real adventure. There is literally so much you can do with sewers, and all you've got to do is try and get that mind to shift from generic sewer into an underground city with all these intricate pieces and interesting NPCs and creatures to uncover. Create all these different dimensions with your fights to make them more interesting, and just using your brain to come up with ways to put interesting things in there that wouldn't normally be in a sewer. So tell me, do you players like sewers? If they don't, do you know why? If you're a player, do you love or hate them? Let us know in the comments and let's start debating about it. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy adventurers.